What up, Wizards? It's Dev from The Place. Back from a short break. Took a little 3-dayer there because I felt like my neck and shoulder might literally cause the end of my life. But I'm all meted up now, feeling fine, brothers and sisters, and I figured I'd come back with a fun one today. It was going to be the Sulkin EDH deck tech that I really cannot wait to actually do, but I feel like I should wait till I'm slightly healthier feeling before I upload 100 cards with prices into the timeline during editing. So today we're going to do something a little shorter, a little punchier, but which I still feel needs to be done before we hit Avatar spoiler season, which is in just about a week now. Now, I know a lot of people are actually pretty excited about the Avatar set, but did you know that we've already seen 80 cards from this set? They've really previewed a bunch of stuff, most of it garbage, but that's a lot of like little draft chap stuff or whatever, vanilla creatures here and there. But we have seen a few cards that I think are more than worth pointing out and remembering are in this set when it actually comes out, because you won't see them during preview season, meaning that, you know, you go to your pre-release, there'll be a bunch of cards you've never seen before. Like, I didn't see Deb talk about that card. I'm not going to be responsible for that. So let's talk about 10 cards from the Avatar set that we've already seen that I think are relevant.
And I'm your favorite magic channel's favorite magic channel. Best believe that the professor go bananas for my deck tech.
And we're back with the honorable mention, ladies and germs. I'm going to go ahead and warn you, the first few cards on the list might not look like the most relevant pieces in the world, but, you know, I think they might have a shot, like Iguana Parrot over here. Doesn't look like much. It's a Windrake, has flying, it's a 2/2 for 3 mana, but it also has vigilance and prowess. And I kind of feel like those are 3 really good abilities together. It's certainly no like slick shot show off. Costs 50% more than that thing. Doesn't have haste, right? Doesn't get quite as big on most turns, but prowess is a pretty good ability, especially on a flying creature. And especially, I think people are going to discount the fact that it has vigilance, but you know, the idea that you can get in for 3 or 4 damage and maybe still have some mana up to threaten a good block on your opponent's turn is probably going to keep them from doing much attacking if you have cards in your hand. So I don't know, it could do something. It's both a lizard and a bird, and I don't think it goes in lizard decks or bird decks, but this is just one that every time I look at it, I'm like, well, at least, if nothing else, you're one of the best cards in Limited. You're common, it's great. So just keep your eyes peeled for it there. But apart from that, I think that this might just be overall a better creature than it looks. I guess I'll also make some brief space here for Turtle Duck. This is probably a really bad card, but it is a turtle. It's a turtle bird. So yeah, again, another bird, and importantly, I think maybe a turtle. We've already got a 1-drop turtle and Aegis turtle, but this one could technically be better. I don't know. Aegis turtle definitely blocks better, but still nice to have 2 for sure 1-drop turtles if you'll want to build the turtles deck when the turtle set comes out. So I guess that exists, but let's move on to number 10. Which is a good card. I promise this is a good card we know already from experience. Number 10 is the reprint of Heartless Act over here with really sad artwork. I gotta say that much, but in any case, Heartless Act was like the best piece of 2-drop black instant speed removal when it was in standard before, and I think that might happen again. You know, you've seen a lot of discourse on social media lately about how Shoot the Sheriff kind of actually sucks and it doesn't hit everything you want it to hit. And as far as other stuff goes in the format, like Bitter Triumph, I think I've seen some arguments that I like about that card. In an environment where all your lands deal damage to you, Shock Lands, Starting Town, Multiversal Patches, and Mono Red is one of the best decks in the format, and they just deal a bunch of damage to you with Sunspine Links, Razorkin, Needlehead. Like, it is tough to have a card like this that kind of wants you to pay a bunch of life if you don't have a card to discard. So, you know, maybe we enter a space where Heartless Act is the best removal spell in Standard again. I could definitely see it happening. Turns out I got to lean back or I encounter a lot of shoulder pain. So let's do this for the rest of the video. Number 9 is Raucous Audience, a brand new card in this case, and every other card in the video is new too, but not necessarily a new concept. It's one of the mana dorks for 2 mana, taps for green. But in this case, it's one of the mana dorks that can tap for more than 1 mana given the right situation. And those are always worth looking at, right? There's even some good turn 3 plays with this, you know? On turn 2, you play this. Turn 3, you untap and use the 3 mana in lands that you have to cast a 4-power creature. And now you have 2 mana left over to cast a 2-drop creature or a protection spell or something like that. So I think that might be a pretty good line right there. And starting on turn 4, it becomes really easy to get a lot of mana out of this. We just don't have a ton of playable mana dorks in Standard like this. As a matter of fact, I would go so far as to say that most mana dorks in Standard, apart from Llanowar Elves, have not seen a ton of play over the last few months or even the last year, but this might change that a little bit, so I wanted to bring it up. Does this look weird? Does it look like I'm trying to strike a pose and be a little sexy here, you know what I mean? But no, it's just because it helps with the pain and stuff. Number 8 is Bender's Waterskin, and I know I've already made this joke, but Points to the first person that makes a Futurama art out of this. There will be custom Futurama art for this, but I actually think this is good, potentially even in 1v1s. You could make the argument this thing is great in Commander because it's basically going to pay for itself plus net you a mana over the course of the first turn cycle it's in play, or at least it can, right? But even in 1v1s, it almost pays for itself. It 2/3 of the way pays for itself just the first turn cycle it's out, if you can find things to do with it. And it shouldn't be too hard. There are activated abilities you can keep on the table that cost like 1 mana that you can always, pour this into. That's nice. But even just like Opt and Sleight of Hand and stuff like that, especially if your effects are instant speed, unlike Sleight of Hand, but more like Opt, that works out really well with Bender's Waterskin. I think just that extra mana a turn could be really good, and it even allows, potentially control decks to play a card like this and tap mana on their turn and still have mana on their opponent's turn, which I think is kind of big. I don't really pop for a lot of 3-mana rocks much these days, but this one actually looks like borderline playable to me, so I wanted to bring it up. But let's move on next to number 7, which is Serpent of the Past. You want to play 8 Tolarian Terrors in Standard again? You can do it. I guess you could already do that because we still have like Eddie Merc Crab, I'm pretty sure, in Standard, and the Tolarian Terror deck's not really popping off here. Go check Pauper out if you want to see a good Tolarian Terror deck, but still, I think that having more of these effects, kind of another Cryptic Serpent style effect in Standard, might boost the volume of that deck just slightly. I think Mono Blue is still somewhat playable, and especially if it's got another threat like this, cards like this have proven to be decent in the past, and with Tolarian Terror in the format, I'm not sure this actually is good, because Terror is just better than this. The ward is good. It's only going to cost you 1 blue mana. This costs double that. So these are all factors that you have to consider. But at the same time, again, creatures like this tend to be pretty good. And I'm not sure this one's going to be any different. So don't pass on it. Easiest joke possible. Let's move on to number 6 here, which is my personal favorite card in the set so far. And probably not going to change, honestly. We still got like 200 plus cards to see, or 200-ish cards to see from this set, but I imagine this is the one that's going to excite me the whole time. This is Cat-Gator, which is not a cat, which is kind of upsetting, but it's still going to probably end up in the cat cube. Why wouldn't it? One way or the other. This is just like a corrupt on a stick. That's awesome. It's a body that you can blink. You can reanimate. That's awesome. You can even bounce it to your hand if you got enough mana and just play it again. That's great. I've always loved Corrupt. It's like literally one of my favorite Magic cards of all time. And we are getting closer and closer to the Mono Black Burn Commander deck. Forget about Standard. We tend to do Mono Black Burn every other season. And we'll probably do it the moment this comes out, because we got this and Moreland Devourer of Spiders in Standard right now. And honestly, for a Mono Black Burn Commander deck, Moreland might have to be your commander. That could be okay, but one way or the other. Cat-Gator, just like Grey Merchant of Asphodel, could be pretty good in Commander, even though it's a small amount of mana, just a little bit of mana to cast this thing. 7, let's get whatever. 6, had to check it. I was right the first time. Now, I know it looks kind of bad when your 7-drop dies to a dry burst lightning or Torch the Tower or whatever, but you already got the value that you wanted out of it, and if they put it in your yard, just get it back out. Make that their mistake, so I don't know. This costs a lot of mana. It probably won't do too much at the top levels of Standard, but I don't care about the top levels of Standard. I like having fun, which this card's going to do a lot of for me. We are halfway down the list and ready to enter the Commander's Corner. I'm sorry, I know not everybody's super into this, but we've seen 80 cards, so there's bound to be a couple of good Commander pieces in here. So let's look next at Long Fong Grand Secretariat. Is it Long Fing? I've never seen Avatar. I know that might surprise a lot of people. I'm actually considering sitting down and watching all of Avatar before the set gets officially released and making a video about it or something, but that's not set in stone because that's a pretty big undertaking. There's a lot of that show, but still, I'll at least learn how to pronounce this dude's name and many others. But Long Fang could be great in these commander decks like Gitrog Monster that care about sacking lands or whatever. Note that it's whenever a creature goes to the graveyard. That's cool in like Aristocrats, and it's probably really good in Dina for that reason too, but also goes in the 99 of that Jund EOE deck. There were 2 decks in Edge of Eternities for commander. One of them was Jund, like sack your lands, and this could go really well in that too. Like anything that's trying to put lands in the yard and then use like Crucible effects or Life from the Loam them and stuff to get them back and send them back to the graveyard via sacrifice effects. Works really well with that new like black generating non-basic that can also get you a bunch of like insects when it goes to the graveyard. Like there's a lot you can do with this card. I know it's just 1+1/+1 counter every time this thing pops off, but that can add up really quick over just like 2 turns. So even though I don't know if it's a great commander, it might be a fun one, but I don't know if it's all the way there. It could go in the 99 of a lot of stuff, but let's move from a 99 card to what I think is easily the best commander in the set so far. I mean, we don't know yet, but I again think it might stay this way because Fire Lord Zuko is out of control. This actually does kind of a lot. First of all, it's Mardu colors, so we're off to a good start already in my opinion, right? It starts life as a 2/4, and whenever it attacks, you firebend for its power, basically. If you don't know what firebending is or you forgot or whatever, it's basically whenever it attacks, you add the amount of red that's denoted on the card to your mana pool, but you lose that mana at the end of combat. So you have to do something with it instant speed, basically, whether it's pump spell or again an activated ability that you can activate at instant speed. And that shouldn't be too hard to figure out, especially in Commander, where you've got a lot of things that you can just throw on the table, have activated abilities, do them in combat, you're feeling fine. So I like that about it, but I honestly think the real busted line of text on this is the final line of text, where whenever you cast a spell from exile, or whenever a permanent you control enters from exile, everything, not one guy, everything gets a +1/+1 counter. That'll increase the amount of mana you're getting off of the firebending when Zuko does attack, which is pretty crazy. But apart from that, it just goes absolutely insane with like red impulse draw effects, and there's a lot of those in Commander especially, but there's even a lot of those in Standard for what it's worth. I just don't know if it's a good Standard card. But in Commander, if this sits up in your command zone and you've got, Reckless Impulse, Ren's Resolve, and all the other millions of ways, in red especially, to cast cards out of exile, and there are even a few in white and black for that matter. But if you've got all those effects, then suddenly your dudes are getting really huge and it doesn't cost that much mana. If you happen to cast a spell from exile, and it's a creature, you know what I mean? Like it's an enchantment or something like that, then you basically get 2 +1/+1 counters on everything, which can, again, that adds up so fast over just a turn or two. And depending on when you cast it out of your command zone, you can follow it up with, a Hero's Hangout or something like that. Cast something out of exile and go ahead and anthem your team the turn Zuko comes into play. And that could be really relevant. Even in Standard, that could be somewhat relevant. Also kind of cool that if you do happen to cast a creature from exile, it gets a +1/+1 counter when it comes into play because it triggers itself and, everything gets a counter. So actually kind of wild card here that I think we need to look out for a bit in Standard, but I don't think it's better than a lot of the other 3 drops we have access to. But in the command zone, this thing's a monster. Now next is, I think, the best Commander card in the set so far, which means there's 2 more cards left, and they'll be Standard cards, don't worry. But in any case, Fated Firepower looks kind of busted. I hesitate to use that word, although I usually don't. But still, this looks really good to me. It's one of those red effects that just increases the amount of damage that sources you control would deal. But in this case, not only is it scalable, but it freaking has flash. So it goes really well, first of all, with firebending. Really good with that ability. But apart from that, a flash version of this effect is always good. You can play it on your opponent's turn during their combat step and just completely screw them up. You can play it at the end of their turn. And then maybe also have mana for a shock left, depending on how much you pumped into it. So that might be pretty good. Shock, burst lightning their face or something like that. And yeah, I'm kind of talking about Standard right now, but this is much more of a Commander effect where people like effects like this. Everything from Furnace of Wrath to City on Fire and the million cards between. People, gratuitous violence. There's a lot of effects like this, but none of them are scalable. And I think that especially in Commander, this just pops off like crazy because of the scalability. And the flash gives it a whole new dimension that effects like this don't usually have and could be absolutely huge. So yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to this one for a few different reasons. But for number 2, what if I told you that there was a Lawn War Elves that doesn't tap to make mana and gets larger throughout the game? You'd probably be like, yeah, sign me up for that. Well, it's Momo. Momo's over here and might actually be the best card in the set that we've seen so far, but I think that it's got at least one card that's in competition with it. But I cannot wait to play this card in Standard. I really can't, guys. Like, first of all, this thing is a bat. It's also an ally, which is kind of nice. It's also a lemur, which doesn't matter at all, but it's a bat, which means it goes in these bat, Bats Matter, I guess, decks in Standard. And that could be really, really good. You get to play your Essence Channeler for 1 mana on turn 2, and then maybe have mana up for a Hinterland Sanctifier or something. So that's pretty cool. But you get a 3-drop Flyer on turn 2 some of the time. You get a 4-drop Flyer on turn 3. And if you're able to pull those lines off, suddenly Momo's like a 3/3 Flyer on turn 3, and he's still going to make mana for you throughout the game. And there's a lot of important flyers that this can get down early. You know, you Quantum Riddler on turn 2 for like 1 mana, warping it in, you know, and now you've still got mana to cast the Opt and draw 2. That's awesome. And then on turn 4, you can play it out of exile for 4 mana. That's great. On turn 3, actually, you can play it for 4 mana out of exile. That's crazy. So, like, I think that there's a lot to Momo, and like Blue-White Skies might be like a playable competitive Standard deck if this is one of our 1-drop options. Again, it's basically Llanowar Elves for Flyers that doesn't tap. You know, I can ramp out a Flyer as early as turn 2 and attack for 2 flying that same turn. Those are really aggressive lines, and it's like the most efficient possible card, just a single mana to cast this. I really think this one's got some bright days ahead of it. But my number 1 for Standard especially is Sokka Bold Boomeranger. I don't even watch Avatar, and I know everybody loves Sokka. What I know about him I like. So far, at least, seems like a fun guy. But this dude might not look like much when you first read him, but what he actually is a cheaper Tersa Light Shatter. That is nuts. This is only 2 mana for basically Tersa Light Shatter's effect when it comes into play. And even though it starts as just a 1/1, it doesn't have haste or anything like that, it still gets much larger over the course of the game. You can cast Lessons and make it larger. There are lessons in this set, and there may be legends or lessons in Strixhaven as well, which we go back to soon enough. But, you know, even if you're not casting lessons, it also gets bigger whenever you cast artifacts. Whenever artifacts happen. That seems pretty good. There's actually a few low to the ground like blue-red artifacts decks right now, and even if they're not strictly blue-red artifacts decks, there's still plenty of ways to work artifacts into your deck to make the Sokka larger without having to sacrifice too much in terms of efficiency or optimization or anything like that. So, but especially in decks that want to run wild with Pinnacle Emissary, you know, you warp in Pinnacle Emissary, Sokka gets +1/+1, you play it out of exile from the warp, you get a +1/+1 counter, and everything in between, whether it's Synthesizer Lab Ship, Chainsaw, Ginger Brood, blah, blah, blah. There's so many like efficient artifacts. And I've already made blue-red artifacts the last like 2 seasons in a row, and it's been pretty fun, you know. So I imagine a card like Sokka gets you deeper into your deck. It helps out your Marauding Mako. You know, on turn 2, you play this and your Mako swings for 3. Crazy. So I really think this just slots into specifically those decks, the one that play like Marauding Mako, Fear of Missing Out, Steam Core Scholar, Tersa Light Shatter, like all of those cards in a package, whether it's Reanimator, Vivi, Blue-Red Monument, whatever. This card fits perfectly into those decks. So it's one of the only cards that we've seen so far in Avatar that has a like for sure day 1 home to go into. And that is a huge deal, right? I mean, we can speculate on all these cards, but this is the one that we know definitely will show up in like MTGO leagues the first 3 days of the season. So I got to give it its props for that. This is just a really powerful card, whether you're leveraging it in the discard decks or you're leveraging it in artifact decks, or you got a little bit of both going on. But that is Itski Lewitsky. I know this was kind of a short one today, but I just wanted to pop in and kind of remind you that there are already good cards in the Avatar set. You know, you can go check out like MTG previews or Magic Spoiler or whatever it is that you want to check out if you want to see every card in the set so far. But I really think these are the more relevant ones. Like Iguana Parrot is my honorable mention. I promised I scraped the bottom of the barrel for this one. So I know that we'll end up getting better cards once the actual set comes out. And there are cards I could have mentioned today, like the Aang that we've already seen. Appa looks kind of okay. I don't like having to pay extra mana to like bring my creatures back into play. Like he's definitely not Yorion. I've seen people talk about him like he is. He's not, but still, there are good cards in this set already, and I imagine there'll be a bunch more. So just wait. We'll get them October 28th. So again, I think it's Tuesday or something of next week, a little over a week until we get these bad boys. And honestly, after what happened with Spider-Man, I kind of can't just wait to cleanse the palette and get a new set, even if it is Universes Beyond. I think it's a one that I've seen a lot more people excited about than Spider-Man so far. And I kind of hope it stays that way once we get to start seeing the actual set at large. So in any case, y'all, that's all I've got. If there's anything that I didn't bring up that you know about from this set, then make sure you let me know in the comments section. I'm sure there's stuff you can do with all of these cards. But apart from that, do the YouTube stuff. Like the video. It's the button shaped like a thumb. Hit subscribe down there. Trying to get to 150K. We're not too far away. just like 12K. You know, we made it to 138. We can make it to 150. Let's get there. But I've also got a Patreon. You want to help support the content? $1 a month to vote on what videos we do around here. The last Patreon poll was the Pauper video. We talked about the top 5 decks in Pauper. Check that out if you haven't done it yet. That was a fun one to make. But anyway, new Patreon poll in the next couple of days. So go ahead and sign up. You want to vote in it. Anyway, that's all I've got. That is Allski Kowalski officially. So I will catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.